Hawaii has a moderately regulated tenant screening environment shaped by the state's unique housing dynamics. One of the most expensive and supply-constrained markets in the country, along with broad, fair housing protections and specific provisions that affect screening practices. The governing framework includes the Hawaii Residential Landlord-Tenant Code, found in Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 521, along with FCRA and the Hawaii Fair Housing Law. If you're screening tenants in Hawaii, you need to understand both the state-level requirements and the practical realities of screening in one of the most challenging rental markets in the nation. Let's start with application fees. Hawaii does not have a specific statutory dollar cap on application fees. The Residential Landlord-Tenant Code does not specify a maximum screening fee amount. However, Hawaii's Consumer Protection Framework under Chapter 480, the Unfair or Deceptive Acts or Practices Statute, provides a basis for challenging fees that are excessive or unreasonable. Landlords should charge fees that are proportionate to the actual cost of screening. Most Hawaii landlords charge between $25 and $50 per applicant. Given Hawaii's extremely high rents and strong demand, applicants in competitive markets are generally accustomed to paying screening fees. However, landlords should be transparent about what the fee covers and should not use screening fees as a profit center. Criminal history screening in Hawaii is not subject to a comprehensive statewide, ban-the-box housing law with the detailed procedural framework found in places like Washington, D.C. or Chicago. However, Hawaii has enacted reforms that affect how criminal records can be used, and the state's overall legal culture favors individual rights and rehabilitation. Hawaii has provisions for expungement of certain criminal records under HRS Chapter 831. Once a record is expunged under Hawaii law, landlords cannot consider it in screening decisions. Hawaii's legal culture strongly emphasizes rehabilitation and second chances, reflected in the state's broader criminal justice approach, and landlords should be mindful that overly rigid criminal history criteria may face more scrutiny in Hawaii than in more permissive states. Hawaii decriminalized marijuana possession for small amounts, and medical marijuana is legal. Landlords should be cautious about using minor marijuana records as a basis for denial, particularly in a state where possession of small amounts carries no criminal penalty and medical use is protected. Honolulu, which encompasses the entire island of Oahu and contains the vast majority of the state's population and rental activity, has been active in tenant protection discussions. Honolulu County has enacted various housing-related measures, and landlords on Oahu should monitor local developments that may impose additional screening requirements beyond state law. HUD's 2016 guidance on criminal history and disparate impact applies in Hawaii. Hawaii has one of the most diverse populations in the country, with significant Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Asian, and multiracial communities. Criminal history policies that disproportionately affect any of these groups face scrutiny under federal fair housing law. Hawaii's cultural emphasis on diversity, inclusion, and community responsibility means that overly broad criminal history policies face both legal risk and social disapproval. Source of income protection in Hawaii is addressed through the state's Fair Housing Framework. The Hawaii Fair Housing Law, found in HRS Chapter 515, prohibits discrimination based on several protected categories. Hawaii's interpretation of its fair housing provisions has been applied to protect tenants who receive housing assistance, and landlords should not reject applicants solely because their income comes from housing choice vouchers, Social Security, disability payments, or other government assistance. Hawaii's housing market dynamics make source of income considerations particularly important. The state has some of the highest rents in the nation, and a significant portion of the population, particularly Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, relies on various forms of government assistance. Excluding voucher holders and government-assisted tenants narrows the applicant pool and can disproportionately affect protected groups in ways that create fair housing liability. The Hawaii Civil Rights Commission investigates fair housing complaints and has enforcement authority. The Commission is active in protecting housing rights across all of Hawaii's counties. For credit reports, Hawaii follows FCRA requirements for permissible purpose and written consent. The adverse action process follows federal requirements. Hawaii does not impose dramatically different credit screening procedures from the federal baseline. One critical practical consideration for credit screening in Hawaii: the state's extraordinarily high cost of living affects credit profiles across the population. Housing costs consume a disproportionate share of household income in Hawaii, and financial stress from high living costs can affect credit scores even for employed, responsible individuals. Setting credit score thresholds that are calibrated to Hawaii's local conditions rather than mainland standards is essential. A credit score that would raise concerns in a lower-cost mainland market may be typical for a hard-working, employed tenant in Hawaii who is managing the financial realities of island living. Hawaii's fair housing protections under the Hawaii Fair Housing Law are among the broadest in the country. Protected categories include race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, familial status, marital status, age, ancestry, and HIV status. The specific enumeration of HIV status as a protected category is notable. While disability protections under federal law generally cover HIV, Hawaii's explicit inclusion provides additional clarity and enforcement authority. The ancestry protection is particularly important in Hawaii, given the state's multiracial demographics and the historical significance of Native Hawaiian ancestry. Landlords cannot make screening decisions based on an applicant's ancestry or ethnic background. Hawaii's fair housing protections also reflect the state's unique cultural context. Hawaii has a strong tradition of ohana, family, and communal living. Extended family arrangements and multi-generational households are common in Hawaiian culture. Screening criteria that effectively penalize larger family groups or non-traditional household compositions can create fair housing issues, particularly if they disproportionately affect Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander applicants. Hawaii has specific protections for victims of domestic violence. Under HRS 521-80 and related provisions, tenants who are victims of domestic violence have rights that affect the landlord-tenant relationship, including the right to terminate a lease early and protections against being penalized for domestic violence incidents. In the screening context, landlords cannot deny applicants based on their status as victims of domestic violence or based on incidents at prior tenancies attributable to the perpetrator. From a practical standpoint, Hawaii has one of the most unique and challenging rental markets in the country, shaped by geographic isolation, extremely limited land supply, high construction costs, and powerful demand from multiple competing uses. Oahu, specifically Honolulu and the surrounding communities, contains the vast majority of Hawaii's rental market. Honolulu's economy is driven by tourism. The Waikiki corridor alone generates billions in economic activity. Military: the Pearl Harbor-Hickam Joint Base, Schofield Barracks, Marine Corps Base Hawaii at Kaneohe Bay, and numerous other installations make Hawaii one of the most military-dense states in the country. Federal government, healthcare, including the Queens Medical Center and Tripler Army Medical Center, higher education, the University of Hawaii system, and a growing technology sector. Military tenants represent an enormous portion of Hawaii's rental market, one of the highest concentrations of military renters of any state. The military population includes service members, civilian Department of Defense employees, and contractor personnel stationed across Oahu and the other islands. Military BAH rates for Hawaii are among the highest in the entire nation, reflecting the extreme cost of housing. BAH rates directly drive pricing for a massive segment of the rental market. Landlords in Hawaii who serve the military market should have streamlined processes for evaluating military applicants. The Leave and Earnings Statement shows exact pay and allowances. BAH is guaranteed income for the duration of the service member's Hawaii assignment, typically 2 to 3 years. Military tenants are generally excellent renters, reliable income, employment stability, and the knowledge that their military career depends on meeting their financial obligations. Understanding military income documentation is not just a best practice in Hawaii, it's essential for any landlord operating near a military installation. Waikiki and the urban Honolulu neighborhoods have the highest rents and strongest demand. The North Shore, windward side, including Kailua and Kaneohe, and leeward side, including Kapolei, Ewa Beach, and Waipahu, have varying price points and demand levels. The second city development in Kapolei and Ewa Beach has added significant rental inventory on the leeward side. Maui has a rental market shaped by tourism and the devastating Lahaina wildfire of 2023. The fire destroyed a massive portion of Lahaina's housing stock and displaced thousands of residents, creating an acute housing crisis on top of an already tight market. The rebuilding process is ongoing, and the rental market in West Maui has been fundamentally altered. Landlords on Maui must be sensitive to fire-displaced applicants. Gaps in rental history and credit impacts from the disaster are common and entirely beyond the applicant's control. The Big Island, specifically Hilo and Kona, has a more affordable market by Hawaii standards, driven by tourism, agriculture, astronomy, the Mauna Kea observatories, and the University of Hawaii at Hilo. Kauai has a tight tourist-driven market with limited rental supply. Screening in Hawaii involves unique practical challenges related to the island's geographic isolation. Reference verification for applicants relocating from the mainland requires accommodation for time zone differences. Hawaii is 2 to 3 hours behind Pacific Time and 5 to 6 hours behind Eastern. Screening reports may take slightly longer to compile for applicants with exclusively mainland histories. Having efficient processes for handling these logistics prevents delays in a competitive market. Hawaii's seasonal tourism economy creates workforce housing challenges across all islands. Hotels, resorts, restaurants, and activity companies employ large numbers of workers who need housing. But the seasonal and hourly nature of tourism employment can make income verification complex. Having clear criteria for evaluating hospitality industry income, including consideration of tip income and seasonal variations, is important for Hawaii landlords. One best practice for Hawaii landlords: calibrate your screening criteria to Hawaii's unique economic reality. The state has the highest cost of living in the nation, and housing costs consume a larger share of household income than anywhere else. Standard mainland income-to-rent ratios, like 3 times monthly rent, may need adjustment in a market where housing costs are disproportionately high relative to incomes. Many reliable Hawaii tenants spend 40 to 50% of their income on housing, not because they're overextended, but because that's the reality of island economics. Setting rigid 3 times rent income requirements can exclude a large portion of otherwise qualified applicants. Another best practice, for landlords serving the military market, understand that military tenants' housing decisions are driven almost entirely by BAH rates. Pricing your unit at or near the BAH rate for the appropriate rank and dependency status makes your property competitive for military tenants. The Department of Defense publishes BAH rates annually, typically in December with January effective dates, and landlords should review these rates when setting rental prices and evaluating military applicants. A third best practice, given Hawaii's broad fair housing protections, including ancestry, HIV status, and the cultural significance of Ohana-style living, train everyone who interacts with applicants on the full scope of protected categories. Hawaii's cultural context means that household compositions may differ from mainland norms. Extended family living arrangements are common and protected. Screening criteria that effectively limit household size beyond what's justified by the unit's capacity can create fair housing issues. Hawaii limits the security deposit to 1 month's rent. The deposit must be returned within 14 days of the tenant vacating. If the landlord fails to return the deposit within 14 days, the landlord may be liable for up to 3 times the wrongfully withheld amount, plus attorney's fees and court costs. The strict deposit rules and limited amount make thorough screening essential. Your financial protection is minimal, so getting the tenant selection right is critical in one of the most expensive rental markets in the nation. For the complete guide to Hawaii tenant screening laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our tenant screening law series.